I will never forget the sound of the wrapping paper tearing. It was the only sound in the room. No laughter, no music. Just that fragile crinkle as my daughter's small fingers tugged carefully at the silver edges, peeling them back like something magical was waiting inside. She was 7 years old, and in her eyes even the smallest gift still held the promise of wonder. For a fleeting second her face lit with hope. That soft, innocent smile children wear when they still believe in miracles. But when she lifted the lid, everything shifted. Confusion flickered first, then the kind of hurt a child should never have to know. The box was empty. Plain cardboard staring back at her where a toy or a note or anything at all should have been. Her little shoulders stiffened, her lips pressed together. She looked at me, her eyes wide, not asking for help, only asking if she should pretend it didn't hurt. Before I could move, I heard it. My father's laugh. Sharp, cold, like the bark of a dog in winter. He leaned back in his chair, folded his arms, and said, "Kids like her shouldn't expect anything. World's got enough leeches already." The words pierced the room like glass shattering. My daughter froze, her hands still resting inside the empty box, as if she hadn't looked far enough, as if maybe the gift was hiding somewhere deeper. My chest burned, heat rushing into my throat, but the words I needed snagged there like splinters. Then my sister Sandra spoke, her tone drenched in disdain. "She's just like her mother, always expecting handouts, worthless." I clenched my jaw so hard I thought it might break. The muscles in my face ached, my eyes stung, my palms trembled against my lap. I forced myself to look at my daughter again. She wasn't crying yet, but her chin was quivering, that fragile prelude to heartbreak. Her big brown eyes brimmed with tears she refused to let fall. I hated myself in that moment, for bringing her here, for believing even for a second that this Christmas would be different. That maybe time had softened my father's edges. Maybe my family would see her for who she really was, a bright, creative, kind-hearted little girl who deserved the world. But they didn't see her. To them, she was nothing more than a reflection of me, a reminder of my divorce, of the mistakes and failures they never let me forget. The room was silent except for the low hum of the heater and the relentless ticking of the grandfather clock behind my father's chair. Each second pounded louder than the last, like a countdown to a breaking point I wasn't ready for. My daughter closed the box slowly, her hands trembling now. She stared down at it, then whispered so softly I almost missed it, "I got you a gift too, Grandpa, too." The room shifted. My father looked up, smugness etched into his face. "Oh yeah, this should be good." But she didn't falter. She slipped her tiny hand into the pocket of her coat and pulled out a folded piece of paper, smoothed edges worn from being carried so carefully. She stepped forward, holding it out to him with both hands. And in that instant, I knew the moment wasn't over. Something was coming, something none of us were ready for. It had been over 2 years since I'd stepped foot in this house. Not since the divorce. Not since the day my world splintered under the weight of judgment and shame. But when my daughter asked me weeks before Christmas, "Mom, do I have a grandpa?" I couldn't lie. I said yes. And when she asked if we could visit him this year, I said yes again, against my better judgment. Maybe I hoped they'd changed. Maybe I thought that truly seeing her might spark something human in them, regret, love, even just the faintest warmth. But the moment we pulled into the driveway, that old weight settled onto my chest like barbed wire. The house was still perfect, cold, sterile, as much a museum as a home. My mother greeted us with her plastic smile, her hug perfunctory, her eyes lingering longer on the scuff marks of my daughter's boots than on her face. Sandra barely looked up from her phone, tossing a half-hearted "hey" before disappearing into her scrolling. My father didn't even stand. He sat in his armchair by the fire, whiskey glass in one hand, remote in the other. "Didn't think you'd actually show up," he muttered. That was his way of saying hello. Still, my daughter had tried so hard. She had spent a week drawing little pictures for everyone, folding them into envelopes with their names written in blocky letters. She'd asked me if they'd like them, and I told her they would. I wanted to believe that. I wanted her to feel like she belonged. But as I watched her tiny hands close that empty gift box, as her face tried to stay brave against the cruelty in the room, I realized the truth I had always known: they hadn't changed, and maybe they never would. The paper in her hand looked so small, so fragile against the dim glow of the Christmas tree. She held it out carefully, like it was something precious, like it might break if handled too roughly. My father sneered, swirling the amber liquid in his glass before setting it down with a loud clink. "All right," he muttered, extending one thick, veined hand. "Let's see what this masterpiece is." She placed it in his palm with all the reverence of a child offering treasure. For a second, his face was unreadable as he unfolded the page. I leaned forward, my heart pounding, terrified of what he would say. Terrified of what his reaction would do to her. It was a drawing, simple in crayon. My daughter had drawn a family hand in hand under a Christmas tree. 4 people: a mother, a daughter, a grandmother, and a grandfather. The figures were smiling, even though I knew she had never once seen my father smile at her. Across the top, in bright red crayon, she had written in blocky letters, "Family is the best gift." The silence that followed was unbearable. My father's jaw tightened. My mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Sandra snorted softly, muttering under her breath, "How cute." But my daughter stood tall, chin-lifted, eyes fixed on my father's face. She was waiting. Waiting for some sign that she mattered, that she belonged, that her gift was worth something. And then my father laughed. Not the sharp, mocking bark from earlier, but something deeper, darker. "You think this makes us family?" he said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You think a piece of paper changes who you are? You'll always be what your mother is." "Nothing." The words sliced through me. I shot to my feet, fury blazing in my chest. "Stop it!" I snapped, my voice shaking but loud enough to rattle the ornaments on the tree. "Don't you dare talk to her like that." My father's eyes snapped to mine, cold and venomous. "Sit down," he ordered, as though I were still the child he'd spent years breaking. "This is my house, my rules." But I didn't sit. I couldn't. My daughter's little hands were trembling, but she hadn't cried yet. She was still standing there, still holding on to her courage. I couldn't let him crush that. "She's 7 years old," I said, my voice breaking. 7. And you gave her an empty box. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? Do you even care?" My mother flinched, her lips parting as if to say something, but then she shut them tight. Sandra just smirked, pulling out her phone again as if the drama was a show made for her amusement. My father rose slowly from his chair, towering over us, his shadow stretching across the floor. "You were always ungrateful," he growled, "always whining about what you didn't get, and now you're raising her to be the same." He jabbed a finger at me, then at my daughter. "Both of you leeches. Parasites." Something inside me snapped. Years of silence, of swallowing his cruelty, of pretending I didn't care. It all ignited at once. "No," I said, my voice low, steady. "We're not parasites, we're survivors, and you can't hurt us anymore." For a moment the room froze. Even the clock seemed to pause its relentless ticking. My daughter's eyes widened, her tiny hand reaching for mine, and in that moment I felt something I hadn't felt in years: strength. Not the kind that comes from fighting back with fists or words, but the kind that comes from finally refusing to be broken. I took her hand and turned toward the door. My father barked something behind us, but I didn't hear it. My pulse was roaring too loud, my focus locked on the little girl whose bravery had forced me to stand. As we reached the door, my mother's voice followed us, trembling. "Wait." I turned, stunned. She was standing now, her hands twisting in front of her. Her eyes darted between me, my father, and the drawing still clutched in his fist. For a second, I thought I saw regret flicker there like a candle sputtering against the dark. But then my father growled her name sharp and commanding, and she froze. Her shoulders sagged and she sank back into her chair. The moment was gone. I opened the door, cold night air rushing in. My daughter squeezed my hand tighter. She didn't look back. As we stepped onto the porch, I realized something had shifted. The gift she had given, a piece of paper, a crayon drawing, had changed everything. Not because it softened my father, not because it healed old wounds, but because it showed me the truth: my daughter carried more strength, more love, more hope than anyone in that room. And it was my job to protect that, to protect her. The cold air slapped our cheeks as we crossed the porch, down the steps, into the car. I buckled my daughter in with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. She stared straight ahead, the tree's reflection flickering across the window like little fires going out one by one. I kept waiting for her to cry, to crumble into the smallness of what they'd tried to make her feel. But she didn't. She slid the empty box onto her lap, folded her palms on top of it, and breathed like she was steadying a song inside her chest. We drove in silence. The tires hummed and my thoughts crowded like a bad chorus. Memories of birthdays where the cake arrived late and the critique arrived early. Of graduation night when my father took the diploma from my hands, measured it with his eyes, and said, "Honors in nothing still equals nothing." I'd always told myself his cruelty had limits. Tonight I learned it didn't. Halfway home, my daughter spoke without looking up. "Mom." "Yeah, baby. Can we keep the box?" I glanced at it, ridiculous and light in her lap. "If you want." "It'll remind me," she whispered, "that I gave him a gift." Something in me buckled, the kind of break that also opens. "It will," I said, and because she needed it, I added, "And it will remind me that you changed everything." At the apartment, I warmed milk and made 2 grilled cheeses we didn't finish. She sat on the counter, swinging her feet, tracing circles on the cardboard lid. Later, curled together in her bed, I read the same story twice because I couldn't bear to turn out the light on her face. When she finally slept, hand-fisted around the empty box ribbon like a lifeline, I slipped into the kitchen, leaned my forehead against a cabinet, and let the tears come, the way rain does when the sky can't pretend anymore. My phone buzzed on this table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it until I saw the preview, a photo of the drawing, our drawing, crumpled in a kitchen trash can. For a beat, I couldn't breathe. Then another message appeared. "Come outside." Every instinct sharpened. I checked the peephole before I unlatched the door. On the landing stood my mother, no coat hair, undone, breath clouding. She looked smaller than I remembered her, smaller than she ever allowed herself to be. She didn't ask to come in. She glanced past me toward the dim hall where my daughter was sleeping, and something old and aching moved in her face. "I didn't know you'd left," she said, voice rough. "I should have stopped it. You could have, I said before." I could swallow the truth down. It landed between us like a dish dropped and broken years ago that neither of us had cleaned up. She nodded once, the admission quiet and heavy. Then she held out a plastic grocery bag knotted tight. I dug this out before he could burn it. Inside lay the drawing, smoothed with trembling care. On the back, taped beneath the red letters with a strip of ancient Scotch tape, was a tiny brass key. There was also an index card in my mother's neat handwriting. "Hayes Storage Unit 42B. Use the side gate. Go before he does." My mouth went dry. "What is this?" Her eyes lifted to mine. "Your grandfather died believing he'd done right by you. He set money aside, wrote letters, gave me copies. I didn't get them to you. Your father kept me afraid. And I let him. I'm so tired of letting him." She pressed the bag into my hands as if it weighed more than it did. "He has a system humiliation dressed up as tradition. The empty gift, the sharp joke. He thinks love is a leash." I felt the key bite my palm through the plastic. "Why now?" She looked toward my daughter's room. "Because she looked at him and didn't disappear. Because you stood. Because I remembered being 22 and holding you in a rental kitchen with the oven door open for heat, promising I would not let you grow up in a house that swallowed girls whole. I broke that promise. Maybe I can keep what's left of it." A wind tunneled down the stairwell, lifting a thread of her hair. For a second, I saw the girl she'd been beneath the woman she was, hope and fear in equal measure, both of them loud. "Does he know about the storage unit?" I asked. Her laugh was a breath. "He thinks secrets rot in cedar closets." She stepped back into the cold. "Go in the morning, take her if you want, let her see the truth isn't always cruel." I didn't sleep. The key lay on the coffee table, blinking back at me like a tiny gold eye. Around 3 a.m., I brewed tea I didn't drink and read the drawing's message again, my daughter's block red letters insisting on a world simpler than the one we'd been given. Family is the best gift. I wanted to believe that still. Maybe family wasn't who wrapped boxes for you. Maybe it was who handed you keys. We arrived at Hayes Storage when the sun was just a thin seam of light cutting the horizon. My daughter hugged the empty box as if it were a friend. The place smelled like dust and oil, and the quiet patience of things kept too long. Unit 42B sat along the side row shielded by a chain-link fence and a line of stubborn winter weeds. The key turned with a reluctant click. When I lifted the roll-up door, cold air sighed out like a kept breath finally exhaled. Inside shelves, 3 banker's boxes labeled in my grandfather's hand, a milk crate of VHS tapes and mini DV cassettes, an old cigar tin rattling with something heavy, a flat archival portfolio stamped with a law office's address I recognized from my father's business cards. I touched each gently as if paper could bruise. My daughter stood beside me, eyes wide in the dim, the ribbon from the empty box trailing like a comet tail from her fingers. "Can we open them?" she asked, whispering like we'd entered a church. "We have to," I said, and knelt to the closest box. Inside, statements and receipts, bank ledgers with careful columns, a file tabbed college trust daughter with deposits that stopped the year I married, followed by withdrawals marked emergency Sandra. My stomach clenched. In another file, a signed letter from my grandfather to me, dated the summer I turned 18, never delivered. "If you are reading this, it means your mother and I kept our promise to help you build a life that does not require anyone's permission." I pressed my palm flat to the paper and felt something like grief and vindication share a heartbeat. My daughter squinted at the VHS spine. "What's Christmas 1998? Proof, I said, though I didn't know of what yet. I stacked the tapes, slid the portfolio out. Inside lay photocopies of a will addendum naming me beneficiary of the lake cabin I'd never once been allowed to visit without supervision. There were pictures, too, my grandfather teaching me to skip stones, my grandmother's smile like a soft lamp. And at the bottom of the stack, in a plain manila envelope, a single Polaroid of a living room I knew by muscle memory. The same tree, the same armchair. My father holding an empty box toward a girl with my eyes. Me. I stared until the image sharpened into nausea. He had started this way back then. Tradition, he'd call it. Character building. The annual performance of scarcity for the child he decided unworthy of abundance. My daughter slipped her hand into mine the way she does when she senses the ground is thinner. "Mom, what does it mean?" "It means," I said, voice tight but steady, "we are not crazy. And we are not poor in the ways that matter. It means your drawing didn't just change this year, it changed the story." Her fingers squeezed. "Are we going back?" "Not to stay," I said, and felt the shape of what had to come next rise in me like a tide finding its coastline. The return, the confrontation, the paper spread on a table where no one could pretend the box was anything but empty and the child anything but full. But we are going back. We loaded the car with proof the size of receipts and the weight of years. I buckled her in, and she put the empty box on her knees again, like a drum ready for a beat. Outside, morning finally broke a pale, stubborn light, refusing to take no for an answer. The drive back to my parents' house felt longer than it should have, every mile heavy with the weight of what we carried. My daughter hummed softly in the back seat, tapping the empty box with her fingers as though it were an instrument only she could hear. The sun stretched higher, spilling pale gold across the dashboard, but I felt no warmth, only a storm gathering in my chest. By the time we pulled into their driveway, the house looked even more like a museum than I remembered. Blinds drawn, hedges trimmed to military precision, the wreath on the door too perfect to be real. My stomach twisted. Every instinct screamed to turn around to protect my child from one more round of cruelty. But then I remembered the files, the letter my grandfather had written to me, the Polaroid proof of a tradition meant to break me. And I thought of my daughter's crayon drawing red letters declaring, "Family is the best gift." If I didn't confront this now, that message would wither into a lie. I parked, unbuckled, and turned to her. "Are you sure you want to come in with me?" She nodded, clutching the box tight. "I'm not scared." I wished I could say the same. When we stepped inside, the air was thick with coffee and tension. My father sat in his armchair as always, the television murmuring behind him. Sandra lounged on the couch, scrolling her phone, and my mother hovered in the kitchen doorway, her expression unreadable. The room went quiet the second they saw us. "Well, look who came crawling back," my father sneered, his voice low and mocking. "Couldn't stay away, could you?" I placed the banker's box on the coffee table with a thud that made him flinch. "No," I said, my voice steady. "I came back to show you what you tried to bury." Sandra glanced up, eyebrows raised. "Oh God, here we go again." But when I lifted the lid and spread the files across the table, even she leaned forward. Bank statements, letters, the will, photographs. My father's smirk faltered. "What is this?" he barked, but his voice cracked at the edges. "It's proof," I said, my hand trembling only slightly as I held up the Polaroid. "Proof that you've been humiliating me since I was a child. Proof that you took money, meant for me, stole from my future, to fund Sandra's emergencies. Proof that Grandpa believed in me even when you didn't. And proof that you've been repeating this cruelty generation after generation like it's some sick family tradition." My father's face reddened, his hand gripping the armrest, as if it were the only thing keeping him from exploding. "You don't know what you're talking about," he growled. "Yes, I do," I snapped. "And now so does she." I gestured to my daughter, who stepped forward, clutching her empty box like a shield. Her little voice cut through the room, steady and clear. "Grandpa, you gave me nothing, but I gave you a gift anyway." She placed the box on top of the papers. My father's eyes darted to it, then back to me, fury and shame warring on his face. Sandra broke the silence first. "Wait," she muttered, picking up one of the ledgers. Her smirk had vanished, replaced by something harder. "You used my emergencies as an excuse. You told me there wasn't any money." "Shut up," my father snapped, but the panic in his voice betrayed him. My mother finally stepped into the room, her hands wringing a dish towel. Her voice was quiet but firm. "She's telling the truth. I saw the withdrawals. I didn't stop him." For the first time in my life, my father looked cornered. His shoulders hunched, his eyes darted, his mouth opened and closed without words. The power he'd wielded so effortlessly was slipping piece by piece into the hands of the daughter he'd tried to break. I leaned closer, meeting his eyes. "You thought you could erase me, make me feel small enough to disappear. But you forgot something. Children grow. They remember. And one day they stop bowing." The room was silent except for the faint hum of the television. My daughter slid her small hand into mine, her grip strong. I looked down at her and felt something fierce rise inside me, a flame passed from one generation to the next, refusing to be snuffed out. "We're done," I said, my voice final. "Done with your games, done with your cruelty, done with empty boxes." I gathered the papers, tucked the Polaroid into my pocket, and turned toward the door. My daughter walked beside me, her head high. Behind us, my mother's voice cracked as she whispered my name, but I didn't look back. As the door closed, I knew something fundamental had shifted. The cycle was breaking, the chains were falling, and for the first time I felt like maybe, just maybe, the gift we gave back had changed, not just us, but everything. The door shut behind us, but the echoes of that room clung like smoke. My daughter's steps were small and deliberate, her empty box cradled in her arms. I opened the car door for her, helped her inside, then stood for a long moment staring back at the house. The blinds trembled slightly, as if someone inside had been watching. I slid into the driver's seat, my hands tight around the wheel. My daughter looked at me with those searching eyes that always seemed to hold more truth than I could bear. "Mom," she said softly, "did I do something wrong?" The question gutted me. I turned to her, taking her little hand in mine. "No, baby. You did everything right. You were braver than I ever was." Her lips pressed together, then relaxed into a small, solemn nod. She laid her head back, clutching the box like it carried all the weight she couldn't name. That night, sleep didn't come. I paced the apartment, my mind ricocheting between rage and sorrow. The evidence from the storage unit spread across the kitchen table, lit by the glow of a single lamp. Each piece was a reminder of promises broken, of love denied, of a legacy warped into cruelty. And at the center of it all, my daughter's crayon drawing a message so simple it cut sharper than any ledger or will. "Family is the best gift." The phone rang around midnight, my mother's number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hannah," her voice cracked through the line. "He's furious. He says you'll ruin us if you take those papers to a lawyer. I swallowed the bitterness in my throat. He ruined us a long time ago. There was silence, then a whisper. I'm sorry. For all of it. I should have protected you. I didn't. But maybe I can now. Her words trembled, fragile but real. For years I had dreamed of her saying them, and now that they came, I didn't know how to hold them. It's too late, I murmured. No, she said quickly, desperate. It's not. I can testify. I can confirm what he did. If you go to court, I'll stand with you. I closed my eyes, the ache in my chest deepening. And what about him? Her breath shook. He is not as strong as he pretends. You saw it. The truth scares him more than anything. When I hung up, I looked at my daughter sleeping in her bed, her little chest rising and falling, the box nestled beside her like a friend. And I knew this fight wasn't just mine anymore. It was hers too, and I had to win it for both of us. The following week, I met with a lawyer. I laid everything on the table, the files, the letters, the Polaroid. He leafed through them slowly, his expression shifting from curiosity to grim certainty. This is solid, he said finally. If you want to contest the estate, expose the fraud, hold him accountable, you can. It won't be easy, but it's possible. I thought of my father's eyes, the way they burned with contempt. I thought of my mother's whispered apology. And most of all, I thought of my daughter standing in that living room, holding her gift out to a man who laughed in her face and not breaking. Yes, I said, do it. The storm that followed was fierce. Letters from my father's attorney, calls at all hours, Sandra spewing venom online, painting me as ungrateful, greedy, vindictive. My mother caught in the middle, her voice trembling each time we spoke. But through it all, I held to one truth: the empty gift had been his weapon, and my daughter's drawing had become ours. Weeks later, we returned to court, not for judgment, not yet, but for the first hearing. My daughter insisted on coming. She wore her best dress, the one with tiny silver stars, and carried the empty box under her arm. People stared, whispered, wondered why a child would carry something so strange into a courtroom. But when the judge asked why she had it, she lifted it high and said, "Because my grandpa gave me nothing, but I gave him love." The room went silent. Even the judge seemed caught off guard. My lawyer placed a hand on my shoulder, steadying me. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't hide them. My daughter had spoken the truth clear and unshakable, and there was no going back. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Microphones thrust toward us, questions shouted. My daughter clutched my hand, the box balanced in her other arm. And as flashbulbs burst around us, I realized something had shifted again. We were no longer victims. We were witnesses. We were fighters. And the story was no longer just mine, it was hers too. The weeks that followed moved both unbearably slow and all at once. Hearings stretched into testimonies, motions into depositions. Each time I stepped into the courthouse, I felt the weight of generations pressing down. But beside me, in her small but steady way, my daughter carried that empty box like a lantern, reminding me that even darkness can be broken by a little light. My father tried to fight. He blustered, lied, twisted the story until even Sandra began to question him. He shouted about betrayal, about disloyalty, about how family meant obedience. But paper doesn't bend to rage. The ledgers told the truth. The will told the truth. And the photo, the cruel image of me as a child with my own empty box, spoke louder than any witness ever could. When my mother finally testified, her voice was thin but unflinching. I stayed silent for too long, she told the court. I let fear keep me still. But my granddaughter deserves better than silence. Her hands shook, but her words did not. For the first time in my life, I saw her stand. Truly stand. The verdict wasn't everything. The court didn't erase the years of cruelty or hand me back what had been stolen. But it did something just as powerful: it validated the truth. My father's financial manipulations were exposed. The trust my grandfather had left for me was partially restored. And though Sandra screamed betrayal, even she couldn't deny the proof laid bare for all to see. When it was over, my father sat stone-faced, his empire of intimidation cracked beyond repair. He looked smaller somehow, like a shadow finally cornered by the light. I didn't gloat. There was no triumph in watching a man crumble under the weight of his own cruelty. Only a hollow sort of closure, like slamming shut a door I never wanted to open again. Outside the courthouse, reporters crowded close. Microphones, cameras, a storm of questions. My daughter stood beside me, her empty box hugged close to her chest. I bent down and whispered, "Do you want to say something?" She nodded. Her voice was clear, carrying farther than I thought possible for someone so small. "Family isn't about presents," she said. "It's about love. And if someone gives you nothing, you don't have to give them your heart." The crowd fell silent, then erupted with questions. But I scooped her up, kissed her cheek, and walked away. That was all the answer the world needed. That night at home, we sat together at the kitchen table. I placed the drawing on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a star. My daughter smiled proud and then placed the empty box beside it. "Can we keep it forever?" she asked. "Yes," I said, my throat tight, "because it's not really empty anymore. It's full of the truth, and full of you." She beamed, resting her head against my shoulder. In that moment, I realized the greatest inheritance I could give her wasn't money or property or even justice. It was freedom. Freedom from cycles of cruelty. Freedom from silence. Freedom to know her worth without anyone else defining it. For so long, I believed family was something fixed, something unchangeable. Blood history obligation. But now I know the truth. Family is not the box you're given, it's what you choose to fill it with. Love, kindness, courage, and sometimes the strength to walk away when those who share your name cannot share your heart. So, to anyone listening, if you've ever been handed an empty gift, a life of coldness, of silence, of cruelty disguised as tradition, know this: you don't have to accept it. You don't have to stay small to fit inside their box. You can give a gift back. You can change the story. Because sometimes the bravest thing you can do is stand up, take the hand of the child who believes in you, and walk toward a new kind of family, the one you build with love. If this story touched you, please like this video, share it with someone who might need its message. Subscribe for more stories of truth and resilience, and leave me a comment. Tell me, what empty gift did you refuse to carry, and what did you put in its place?